Race Discrimination by Marla Newsome. Discrimination exists when employees of one race are favored by the employer over employees of another race. Usually, it is the white race favored over the black race. But there are also many instances of Hispanics, Asians, American Indians being subjected to race discrimination. There are even isolated instances of white people being victimized as well. This was a case of EEOC versus Patterson UTI Drilling Company. By association and advocacy. There are instances where employers discriminate against individuals because of their race, but also against those individuals who either associate with the initial targets of discrimination and or advocate for their protection. These individuals, who may or may not be the same race as those victimized, are entitled to claim race discrimination if their employment is adversely affected. Forms of discrimination are prohibited. The Equality Act recognizes that discrimination can arise in a number of different ways, including direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, victimization, and harassment. However, in relation to discrimination by association, only direct discrimination and harassment are prohibited in the legislation. Direct discrimination by association may occur in the worker/manager example above. Harassment by association may arise where, for example, a non-Jewish employee with a Jewish partner is subject to inappropriate workplace banter about Jews. Harassment. Racial harassment in the workplace exists when conduct by coworkers, superiors, or the organization itself has created a hostile work environment based on race in which the victimized employee's ability to do his or her job has been impaired. Evidence of the severity of the incidents is equally as important as their frequency. Racial harassment. When an employee claims that he or she is being racially harassed by a coworker, the employee must notify the employer. The employer must not condone this activity and must investigate the complaint in a timely fashion. If the employer finds a reasonable basis for believing that the harassment exists, it must take corrective action immediately. Otherwise, it will be held liable. When the harassment originates with the employer itself, no notification is needed, and the employer will be held liable. This was a case of EEOC versus Shanka USA's Building Company. Color discrimination, where favoritism occurs between people of mixed races as well as to people of the same race who have different color of pigmentation. Title VII prohibits discrimination against color in addition to race. There are many exceptions. White people from Southern Europe tend to have a darker pigmentation than white people from the Northern Europe. Black, Asian, and Hispanic people also have different shades of pigmentation. This is a case of EEOC versus U-Haul Company International and U-Haul Company of Tennessee. Reconstruction Era Act. Following the abolition of slavery with the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution in 1866, Congress passed the Reconstruction Era Act. The act provided blacks with right to make and enforce contracts as enjoyed by white citizens. Title VII applies to employers with 15 or more employees. The Reconstruction Era Act applies to all employees. Title VII also has a statute of limitations for filing. The Reconstruction Era Act does not. Title VII placed monetary limitations on the recovery of compensatory and punitive damages. The Reconstruction Era Act does not. Reconstruction Era Act. The application of Reconstruction Era Act is limited to race, color, and national origin. It does not apply to sex, religion, disability, or age. Reconstruction, one of the most turbulent and controversial eras in American history, began during the Civil War and ended in 1877. It witnessed Americans' first experiment in interracial democracy, just as the fate of slavery was central to the meaning of the Civil War. So divisive politics of Reconstruction turned onto the status the former slaves would assume in the reunited nation. Reconstruction remains relevant today because the issues central to it, the role of the federal government is protecting citizens' rights, and the possibility of economic and racial injustice are still unresolved. The Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. The amendment, which originally applied to only the federal government, was later applied to the states through the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment also guarantees to all persons the equal protection of the law. The amendment only embellished the validity of the argument against discrimination. The Fifth Amendment creates a number of rights relevant to both criminal and civil legal proceedings. In criminal cases, the Fifth Amendment guarantees the right to a grand jury, forbids double jeopardy, and protects against the self-incrimination. It also requires that due process of law be a part of any proceeding that denies a citizen life, liberty, or property, and requires the government to compensate citizens when it takes private property for public use. The 14th Amendment addresses many aspects of citizenship and the rights of citizens. The most commonly used are frequently litigated phase in the amendment is equal protection of the laws, which figures prominently in wide variety of landmark cases, including Brown versus Board of Education and racial discrimination. This is a chart of racial discrimination statistics in 2005, reported by each race: white, black, Asian, Latino, multiracial, or other. Here's also a chart of mistreatment by police, experienced at a time when your family member was unfairly treated by police. Also broken down into white, black, Latino, and Asians. Shows racial discrimination. Racial discrimination refers to the practice of treating individuals differently because of their race or color. Federal law prohibits race discrimination in the workplace, and incidents of race discrimination can take many forms in the workplace. Particularly, race discrimination can be hard to identify. I chose race discrimination to do my project on, for the simple fact that it still happens. For instance, when my husband and I first moved to Thomasville back in 2009, I was told that one of the local banks was hiring and that I should go and apply for the job. So I always do when looking for work. I was dressed as if I was going for an interview, resume in hand, and also my references. Walked in, the receptionist asked if they were hiring. She looked at me as if I was an alien. She did not have to speak to me to even let me know that I was not the right color, race to work there. Sometimes people do not realize that racial expressions tell everything. Needless to say, I have never stepped foot in that bank again. Here are my sources.